Well, good afternoon and welcome to Managerial Accounting. Today is day 28 for the fall 2022 semester. And we've just decided here in the classroom that today will be the last day for new material. So we'll be covering all of chapter 28 today in this one video. So since we're starting chapter 28, the chapter 28 pre-quiz will be due today. The chapter 27 problem, because we finished chapter 27 last class, chapter 27 problem is also due today. Even though we're fitting chapter 28, which is a pretty short chapter, into just one class day, none of the due dates that were on the original syllabus will be changed. So even though we'll finish the chapter 28 exercises or mostly finish them, we'll go over all of them today in class. The exercises won't actually be due until Thursday. As originally planned, the problem will be due on Tuesday. There'll be no class on Thursday. Tuesday's class will not be an on-campus class. It will be on Zoom only. It will be a review session. So you're welcome to attend or not attend, depending on your level of perceived preparedness for that exam. Yeah. Today is the last in-class session. Yes. So Tuesday, if you choose to come to the review session, will be on Zoom only. We will use the link for the class, and we'll meet at the regular class time on Tuesday, so 1:30 on Tuesday, using the Zoom link for class if you choose to attend. Like all the classes, I guess it's optional, but even more so because we won't be covering any new material on that day. I would expect that what we will do is go through the practice set for the exam. So if you find that beneficial, if you've attended those before, or maybe haven't, but should have, you are welcome to join us for the review session on Tuesday. If anyone is there, we will have the review session and I will record it and post the recording, just like I have for the other review sessions that have happened. And then next Friday, the 16th, is the official last day of the semester. That's the last day to withdraw from any classes during the semester. It is also the day that our last exam is due. So that exam just covers chapters 26, 27, and 28. So it's a shorter exam, and we'll look at that exam quickly today as well. That it's a shorter exam in that it covers fewer chapters than exams 1 and 3, but it is worth just as much towards your final grade as the other exams. And so once you finish that exam, you are done with all of your assignments for this class. So that's where we stand. Any questions? Any questions at this point? Okay. So although I have my chapter 28 exercises open, I think we should start with looking at the practice set and the exam, just to make sure we get that in today. So this is the practice set for the exam. As you know, these are not graded. There are only 7 exercises on the practice set because there isn't as much of what I think of as the doing of accounting for these 3 chapters. So you can see that these questions are all from chapters 26 and 27. So capital expenditures, and then the chapter that we did last week. So on lean manufacturing, lean accounting. And so there aren't even any exercises in the practice set from chapter 28 because, again, there's not so much of the doing of accounting in chapter 28. It's more conceptual in nature. So we have some exercises on net present value, average rate of return, cash payback period, and internal rate of return. So those are the 4 approaches to evaluating capital investment projects that we learned in chapter 26. You can expect to see all 4 of those on the exam. And then from chapter 27, we did an exercise in class related to lead time. This is just a pared down version of that. And process activity analysis, and then lean accounting. So all of those are related to exercises that we did in class last week. Then if I pull up the exam, so on the exam, there are a total of 24 questions. The points for each of the 3 chapters are roughly evenly spaced on the exam. And just like with the first 3 exams, we have a mix of multiple choice questions. And most of those multiple choice questions are ones that I would expect that you can read the question and choose the correct answer, or maybe consult your notes or the textbook. As with all the exams, the exam is expected to be taken using your book and other notes and other resources you might have. You just can't use someone else as a resource. We do have some exercises though that are related to those exercises that I just showed you in the practice set. So computing lead time, value added lead time, average rate of return. That's a net present value question. Lean accounting. Oh no, that's not lean accounting, sorry. That's not lean accounting. And activity analysis. So, oh, and there's an internal rate of return. So the questions again, mix of multiple choice, free response with the exercises. You have a time limit of 3 hours on the exam, just like the other exams. You want to make sure you open your ebook before you start the exam. Once you start the exam, you can't pause it. The exam is available to you right now. So since we are going to be finishing chapter 28 today, you are welcome then to finish the problem and take the exam whenever it's convenient for you. I have talked to a couple of students who wanted to take their last exams in other classes of mine, maybe this week because they have either a big schedule next week or because they're leaving campus early next week and need to, or middle of next week, and need to make sure that they're done with all their work before they go. So if that applies to you, if you'd rather take your exam this week, even though it's not due until next Friday, it is available. You're welcome to complete the work and finish whenever you are ready to do that. Obviously, you should finish all of your assignments for the 3 chapters before taking the exam. And if you do have any questions, including on that practice set, you're welcome to ask them, get help if you don't want to wait until after Tuesday's review session to take your exam. Make sense? Okay. Any questions about what we have remaining to complete for this semester? And just so you know, I will still be on campus on Thursday. So even though we won't be having class in the classroom on Thursday, I will be in my office for the afternoon. So if you do have questions or anything else you want to talk about, you're welcome to stop by my office in the Hultquist Building 242, or you can meet with me on Zoom. Just send me an email requesting a time, and I'll set up that appointment for you. Is there any questions or questions, anything from last week on lean accounting or anything else? If everybody's good, we're just going to move into our final chapter. So chapter 28 is on the balanced scorecard and corporate social responsibility. So you can see the learning objectives for this chapter, and our focus mainly will be on how do we improve our company? How do we measure how our company is doing, and what type of measurements are appropriate? Is it that might go beyond financial measures? So for at the end of the financial accounting portion of the book, chapter 14 is on financial investment analysis. And so that whole chapter, and that's the chapter we're working on in financial accounting right now as we finish up that course, that whole chapter is focused on looking at the dollars and cents from the company's financial statements and using that information to make decisions about a company. But I think it's appropriate that this final chapter of the 28 in the book, this final chapter focuses on, but it's not all financial. There are other ways of evaluating the performance of a company. There are other considerations in the running of a company that might go beyond just the bottom line on the income statement, the bottom line on the balance sheet. And that's really the whole focus of the balanced scorecard, is taking into account those other perspectives that go beyond the financial performance of a company that might also indicate a successful company. So we're going to be looking again at performance measurement systems. So how well are we doing to meet the company's objectives, which again, may not be, probably should not be only financial in nature from the financial statements. That's one aspect, and it's certainly a very important aspect. But the other pieces of the puzzle are also relevant to the ultimate success or failure of that company. So the balanced scorecard is a very typical, very common, well-known performance measurement system. And it takes into account not only the financial or the investor's perspective, but also the perspectives of other stakeholders in the organization. So it looks at things not just from the investor, but also from management, from the customers, and from the employees' perspectives as well. Some of those measures then are going to be non-financial. So when we look at the customer's perspective, we might be looking at things like, how many complaints do we have from the customers? How many repeat customers do we have? Counting or measuring success based on that type of criteria, which may certainly translate into financial, the financial picture, but it's not necessarily as clear cut if we count, employee complaints, or we count the number of repeat customers. Occasionally in our exercises, and certainly when we are talking about measuring the performance of a company, there are some items that we measure that might be what we call leading indicators that give us kind of an advance warning of something coming. And then there are other measurements that might be lagging indicators that are after something has happened. Down the road, we get this other picture. So I can give you an example in the economy. When we talk about economic indicators, leading indicators are things like what's going on in the manufacturing sector. So those are leading indicators because they happen first, and then you might see a slowdown in the economy later on. So other measures might come in after the fact or lagging the actual event itself. So most of the exercises we cover in this chapter, some of them are going to be like our last chapter, that some of them are more multiple choice, read the question and pick the correct answer. As I explained in the practice, when I was looking at the practice set, there really isn't a lot of what we typically think of as doing accounting in this chapter, because we're talking about conceptual review of a company. But everything you see on this slide is something we're going to be looking at in at least one of the exercises that is upcoming. This is what a balanced scorecard might look like. So I mentioned the 4 perspectives already. So the financial perspective is from the viewpoint of the investors. How would an investor know if the company was successful? What would happen, or how would we know that the investor considers the company successful? Those are going to be financial measures, things like profit margin, on return on investment, return on assets, things like that. The internal processes part is management's perspective. So how efficiently or how well is the company running? Learning and growth is the perspective of the employees. So are the employees advancing in their knowledge and understanding of the company? Is there room for them to maybe be promoted or to take on additional responsibilities or learn new tasks that they otherwise might not have the opportunity to do. And then finally, the customer's perspective. So there's a lot of maybe criticism out there of the corporate form of organization, that it's all about the bottom line, it's all about the income statement, about making money, and not only making money, but making money now without without a forward-looking concern about the future. It's all, what have you done for me lately? What's stock price doing? And it's really not a fair scenario in some cases, in many cases, because a company that takes into account these additional performance perspectives also recognizes that they are keeping their stakeholders happy, satisfied, engaged, and that is more likely to translate into future success of the company. And so that's why the balanced scorecard is really very intuitively attractive, because it does more focus toward the future by keeping all of these perspectives, not just how much money did we make on the income statement, but are our employees satisfied? Are our customers satisfied? Are the internal processes and management working well together? And then that, the financial piece, that is probably the first one that comes to mind. Okay, I think we will go to exercise 1 at this point. We'll come back to the PowerPoint. And as I said, some of these exercises most of them are reading the given information and then choosing the correct answer. Make that a little bigger, a little easier to read. And so I think we will have time in the class time that we have today. We'll have time, I think, to get through each of these, but it does mean that I'll be reading them out loud to you, and maybe adding in some comments as we go. Henry's Cafe is a local restaurant that is growing quickly. While the company does not yet have a balanced scorecard, Henry has mentioned that being efficient in producing meals is a high priority of his business and appears to be a significant driver of profits. Henry tells you he gathers the following data: sales, cost of labor, employee turnover, labor hours, cost of ingredients, overhead costs, average training hours per employee, number of erroneous meals prepared, the time when orders were made, the time when orders were delivered, and number of customers per day. Under which performance perspective on the balanced scorecard should Henry's strategic objective to efficiently produce meals be produced? So the efficient production of meals is related to the management perspective or internal processes. So once we've identified that in the internal processes portion of the balanced scorecard, we want to focus on the the efficient production of meals, we then have to, thinking about the data that Henry is gathering, we need to answer the question of, well, how are we going to know if we are meeting our objectives? We want to set a goal or an objective, maybe so you can see that he's gathering data about the time the orders were made and when they're delivered. So we could answer the question of, are we being efficient by how long is it taking for us to produce a meal after it's ordered? That seems like a good starting point. It is important when we think about each one of these perspectives, it's important for us to have goals and objectives related to each one. Determine in advance, how are we going to measure that? And what's our goal? What do we expect to have happen? And then gather the data, compare it to what we were hoping or what we were expecting, what our objective was, to determine were we successful in meeting that learning objective or that objective. And so within each one of the 4 performance categories, we need to think about what are our objectives? How are we going to measure it? How will we know if we were successful? In this case, under the internal processes performance perspective, Henry wants to be efficient in producing meals. And so how is he going to measure that? He could measure it based on minutes from order to delivered. He could measure it based on the amount of labor hours that it takes to produce each meal. He could measure it based on the number of mistakes they make. Or he could measure it based on the cost of ingredients per meal and the number of meals per hour. Each one of those seems like a very legitimate way of measuring efficiency. So if Henry was going to use each one of these first 4, A through D, for each one of them, he would need to decide what's our goal. So if we're going to measure minutes from order to delivered, what's our expectation? And it could be something like 80% of meals are delivered within, I have no idea what kind of restaurant this is, 80% of meals are delivered to the table within 15 minutes of ordering. We need to be very specific. Are you familiar with the concept of a SMART goal? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-based, right? So we need to make sure that we have a way of measuring to know at a specific time in the future, we're going to compare our data to our objectives and say, yes, we were successful, or no, we were not. And if we were not, how do we fix this? Was it that the goal wasn't appropriate? Was it unrealistic? Did we not give ourselves enough time to meet the goal? Letter C says, identify whether the performance metrics you suggested in part B are leading or lagging indicators relative to a performance metric total cost of production per meal. So remember, a leading indicator is something that we're going to know in advance before we know, in this case, the total cost of production per meal. A lagging indicator would be something that we recognize after the fact, after the production of the meal in this case has already happened. So minutes from ordered to delivered. Why? All right. I don't know why this should be giving me the option of, is yours working? Are you able to change yours from leading in part C? Do you see options there? Does that, on part C, do you guys have, when you click on that arrow, does it tell you leading or lagging? You can choose?
Yes.
I don't know why. I don't know why mine is not letting me do that. Bizarre. Very strange. All right, well, we'll just have to answer them because for some reason mine is not cooperating. So minutes from ordered to delivered, labor hours per meal, number of erroneous meals, cost of ingredients, and number of meals produced per hour. Each one of those is actually a leading indicator. That's something we're going to be measuring before we can know the total cost of production per meal. So each one of those is a leading indicator. It indicates something about our performance in the future. So each one of those contributes to the total performance, the total cost of production per meal. And I'm unsure why I'm not able to. I don't know why. If I type the letter L, and then, yeah, if I wanted to go down, I don't know. Sorry. There we go. I don't know why mine won't work. Okay, so any questions about that? So as we move on to our next exercise, the balanced scorecard for a service company. And this is a concept that's come up over and over throughout the semester, that many of the concepts that we talk about in the various chapters, although we look at them primarily from a manufacturing standpoint in this course, many of these concepts can also apply just as well to a service company or a merchandising company. So that is definitely true for the balanced scorecard, that the concepts of evaluating the 4 different performance perspectives is very valid for a service company as well. American Express Company is a major financial services company noted for its American Express card. Some of the performance measures used by the company on its balanced scorecard are listed below. For each measure, identify whether the measure best fits the learning and growth, so that's employee, internal processes, that's management, customer, or financial performance, and that is the investor piece of the balanced scorecard. So the average card member spending, I would say that that is related to the customer's satisfaction, customer perspective. Number of internet features would be related to management. Cards in force, so how many cards do we have out there in the hands of the public right now, would be related to management. Number of merchant signings, so probably customers would be happy if they can use their card in more locations. So bringing in new locations that accept American Express would be a good way of evaluating customer satisfaction. Earnings growth is certainly financial or investor. Number of new card launches. So this one is a little bit more difficult for me to know with just those few words what they mean there. New card launches is maybe related to the learning and growth of our employees, but that's a difficult one to know exactly what they mean by that. Hours of credit consultant training is definitely related to employees, giving them training to expand their knowledge base, be a more productive member of the team. Return on equity is certainly a financial measure. Investment in information technology. Oh, no, this one's not going to work either. Sorry. Investment in information technology would help our employees. Revenue growth would be financial. And number of card choices. Again, I'm not really sure what they mean by that, but it could be related to our employees. I would say a new card launches and card choices are probably the same in the same vein, but I'm not exactly sure what they mean by those. So again, identifying the performance metric of, I'm just going to take the top one, average card member spending. So we've said our customers, we can gauge how happy they are with the product that we're offering, the service that we're offering them, American Express card, based on how much they spend using their card. And so we've identified that as the metric, but then we have to identify what the goal is. And so I have no idea what the number might be, but maybe it's just throwing a number out there. Maybe we say it's $1,000 per month average spending, or maybe it's something like using the card in an average of 3 merchants a month, or at 1 new merchant every 3 months. So it's not enough to say, yeah, average card member spending is important to the customer, for us to evaluate from the customer's perspective how we're doing as a company, but we have to set a goal, and then we have to measure, and we know that some of those measures may be non-financial in nature. So number of new card launches, for example, would be a non-financial measure, but it has to be something that we can evaluate in an objective way. And so usually that means quantifying our metric, putting a number on it. It may not be dollars and cents, but it does have to be, in order to be an appropriate or a smart goal, it does have to be something that we can measure and then compare that actual result to the standard or the objective that we had set. So now that we've talked about that, let's actually build a balanced scorecard. And you can see for this company, we're going to be looking at some possible balanced scorecard measures. And just like we did in the last exercise, for each one of those, after we read through the vignette, the story, we're going to determine for each one of these balanced scorecard measures that we are considering, which perspective would that be? Eat and Run Incorporated owns and operates 10 food trucks or mobile kitchens throughout metropolitan Los Angeles. Each food truck has a different food theme, such as Irish Mexican fusion, traditional Mexican street food, Ethiopian cuisine, and Lebanese Italian fusion. The company was founded 3 years ago by Juanita O'Brien when she opened a single food truck with a unique menu. As her business has grown, she's become concerned about her ability to manage and control the business. O'Brien describes how the company was built, its key success factors, and its recent growth. I built the company from the ground up. In the beginning, it was just me. I drove the truck, set the menu, bought the ingredients, prepared the meals, served the meals, cleaned the kitchen, and maintained the equipment. I made unique meals from quality ingredients and didn't serve anything that wasn't perfect. I changed my location daily and notified customers of my location via Twitter. As my customer base grew, I hired employees to help me in the truck. Then one day I realized that I had a formula that could be expanded to multiple trucks. Before I knew it, I had 10 trucks and was hiring people to do everything that I used to do by myself. Now I work with my team to build the menu, set daily locations for the trucks, and manage the operations of the business. My business model is based on providing the highest quality street food and charging more for it than other trucks. You won't get the cheapest meal at one of my trucks, but you will get the best. The superior quality allows me to price my meals a little bit higher than other trucks. My employees are critical to my success. I pay them a better wage than they could make on other food trucks, and I expect more from them. I rely on them to maintain the quality that I established when I opened my first truck. Things are going great, but I'm feeling overwhelmed. So far, the growth in sales has led to a growth in profitability, but I'm getting nervous. If quality starts to fall off, my brand value erodes, and that could affect the prices that I charge for my meals and the success of my business. So based on that story, identify whether these measures best fit the learning and growth, employee, internal processes, management, customer, or financial performance, investor perspective of the balanced scorecard. Okay, so the first one, average meal price. So that is a financial measure. Investors are interested in how, or the owners are interested in average revenues per sale. Number of meals purchased might be a measure for the customer satisfaction. Certainly, online customer review ratings are related to customer, as are customer complaints. Those are items that we talked about earlier. Average employee wage is related to the management of the company. Training hours is related to learning and growth perspective. Quality ratings of ingredients, quality ratings of ingredient suppliers, the suppliers of our ingredients. And that would be related to the management of the company. Gross profit and profit margin, wow, are both investor or financial perspectives. And number of unique meals on the menu might be related to learning and growth, or our employees' perspective. So if some of these seem a little bit, dodgy, if you're thinking, well, Wouldn't the customers care about number of unique meals on the menu? There's definitely an intertwining. If I were to remind you of that picture where we ended in the PowerPoint, there's definitely a relationship or an intertwining of some of these perspectives. All of these are critical, as I said, to the ultimate success of the company. And so, yes, sometimes it is difficult to evaluate, well, is that management or is that employee? But the most important, that's really not a critical piece. The most important part is that we recognize that the ultimate success or performance of this company keeps all of these perspectives in mind. And something that makes a customer happy also might be related to an internal processes or a management perspective as well. Questions, anybody? Excuse me. So up front, our company is making a decision about, for each of the 4 perspectives, we are identifying the metrics that we're going to use. We may have one or more metrics, one or more objectives for each one of those 4 perspectives. Once we have the objectives or our goals established and we've decided how are we going to measure this, how are we going to know if we're successful, then we have to go about gathering the data and comparing the actual results to what we hoped or we expected or what we set as our goal. And then the final step is, okay, now we know how we did, what do we do with this? If we met our goals, how do we continue? And do we push the bar a little farther? Do we set the bar a little higher? If we didn't meet our goals, is it because the goal wasn't achievable? Or did we not give ourselves enough time? Or did we not give ourselves the resources? What are we going to do with this goal for going forward? In exercise 4, it says Buffalo Barbecue Restaurant is trying to become more efficient in training its chefs. It is experimenting with 2 training programs aimed at this objective. So based on what we've already discussed, we know that training is part of the learning and growth performance perspective. So we're looking at the employee's perspective. Both programs have basic and advanced training modules. The restaurant has provided the following data regarding the 2 programs after 2 weeks of implementation. So we have apparently 10 new chefs within the 2 weeks. 5 of those chefs were put through training program A and completed basic and advanced training. And you can see how many mistakes they made. The other 5 chefs were put through training program B. It looks like all of them completed the basic training, and all but 1 completed at least some advanced training. And just looking at this quickly, it appears that the chefs that went through training program B were more successful. That it may be that they took fewer hours of training overall. Looks like across the board, they had fewer hours of training than the chefs in program A, and they even with lower amount of training, they made fewer mistakes. So our job then is to compute the following performance metrics, because it's not enough for us to just say anecdotally, yeah, it looks like it took less time to train them and they produced fewer mistakes. We need to actually calculate. So we actually need to put the numbers on this. As I said, it's important that we have objective results that we can point to demonstrate, yes, we are successful, or no, we are not. It's not enough to say things like, I feel like this worked. I feel like this one was better. So the first thing we're asked to do is calculate the number of hours of employee training per chef. And we start with program A. So we're going to be adding these hours and these hours to get the total number of hours, and then divide by the 5 chefs in the program. So go ahead and do that. And when I added those 10 numbers together and then divided by 5, I found an average of 32.4 hours of training per chef for program A. And then we can do the same thing for program B. Again, make sure you're adding the basic and the advanced training hours. And again, there were 5 chefs, so divide by 5. And so what we could see just anecdotally before we even started doing any calculations, we now have evidence that program B took fewer hours. That's 3 fewer hours, which means that each chef was ready to work, fully trained, 3 hours faster in program B than in program A. Presumably we're paying them to work those training hours. And so we've saved money on, possibly saved money on the training because it's fewer hours, 15 total fewer hours of training in program B than program A. What I don't know is whether program B costs the same amount to implement as program A when we take out the hours worked. For number 2, we're asked to calculate the average number of mistakes per chef. So again, we're adding the 5 together and dividing by 5. And do the same thing for training program B. And divide by 5. So it does not tell us the actual cost of the training programs, but assuming that they cost the same, what would our recommendation be? Well, they complete the training in 3 fewer hours and they make less than half the mistakes if they went through program B as program A. So which one would we implement? If they cost the same amount, we would say program B. If our only concern was which one's faster and which one makes fewer mistakes, the answer would definitely be program B. However, if it turns out that program B costs twice as much, we might have to decide that, a few extra hours and a few more mistakes are worth saving the money on the training. But we can only go with the information that's provided to us. So we're going to say program B based on these 2 criteria. Questions, anybody? So here's an example of a balanced scorecard for Smith Company. You can see the 4 different performance perspectives that we've been talking about. In each one of these perspectives, we have identified some goals. We have come up with some objectives some initiatives for how we're going to do that. So for example, under internal processes, we have an objective of improving delivery accuracy, and we have an initiative to automate the warehouse in order to improve delivery accuracy. So you notice that not each goal, it is not the case that each goal has an initiative associated with it. We could, but there's probably money attached to those initiatives, and we may not have enough money to fund initiatives for each one of those objectives. You can also see for each one of the objectives, we've identified the metric that we're going to use. So under improved talent acquisition, the metric we're going to use is the % of our entry-level hires that come from top 10 colleges. And then we have identified our goal. How will we know if we're successful? If 60% of those entry-level hires come from top 10 colleges, we will call that successful. Okay, so does everyone understand how to read that scorecard? So now we just have a few questions to answer here. Using the given balanced scorecard, identify the strategic initiatives of the company. And we've said that we have two here: recruiting at the top 10 colleges and automating the warehouse. So of the choices that are given here, the only one that is listed of those two is automating the warehouse facility. Identify the performance perspectives of the company. And we've already said that those are the 4 items across the top. So learning and growth, customer and internal processes, financial. So the answer is all of the above. And finally, from the given balanced scorecard, identify the overall strategic objective of the company. I don't know why this is not working. So I think it's still fair to say that the purpose of any company is to make money. The purpose of every company is to be successful, to pay their bills, to be profitable, and to remain solvent in the long run. The fact that we are suggesting in this chapter that it's not just about financial doesn't mean that it's not the overall objective of the company to be financially successful. It's simply recognizing that those other perspectives, keeping your customers happy, keeping your employees happy, keeping your management efficient and effective, all of those feed into ultimately increasing the financial success of the business, increasing the profitability of the business. Moving on then. Our next exercise deals with strategy maps. Brand Grocery developed a balanced scorecard with 6 strategic objectives under the standard 4 performance perspectives as follows. So for each one of the 4 perspectives, we've identified at least 1 objective, and for a couple of them, we have 2 objectives. Using the given balanced scorecard, identify the strategy map or relationship among the performance perspectives. So our choices include, we could train employees to improve employee satisfaction, which would lead to improved inventory management, which should lead to reduce receiving errors, and then lead to improved customer service, which would ultimately increase profits. So there's a map or a connection from each one of those things that we want to do. You'll notice that each one of those that I just read is listed here under one of the perspectives. As I've been trying to explain, as I've been trying to suggest, there's a connection between all 4 of these. So training employees is related to the learning and growth of the employee perspective, but it should directly, we hope, lead to improved employee satisfaction, which should make our management processes run more efficiently if we have trained and satisfied employees. And so letter A, so all of these others, in letter B, you're missing a number of steps. Going from improving employee satisfaction would probably not lead directly to increasing profits, that there's something missing in the middle. It is probably not that if we improve inventory management, it leads to trained employees. It's probably the other way around. And improving customer service probably doesn't directly lead to improving employee satisfaction. Again, it's probably the other way around. If our employees are more satisfied, they're likely to provide better customer service. For letter B then, if employees are provided with proper training, what are the possible outputs or changes in the strategic perspectives? So again, as we went through this strategy map, in letter A, we said training employees leading to improved satisfaction probably can down the road lead to all of those other pieces. Improved satisfaction, improved management, reduction of errors, improved customer service. And so I think, again, there's a connection here. Providing the employees with proper training can certainly, as a possibility, lead to all of those other pieces in the strategy map. Anybody with questions? Okay, let's move on then. Unique balanced scorecards. So I think it's safe to say that there are some metrics that might apply across the board to many companies, like improving profitability, improving customer satisfaction. But for certain companies, you know, what their metrics are may be very specific to that company and not widely applicable to other companies. Before we go through this, let me go back to the PowerPoint for a moment. I just got to find the. Sorry, I'm just not sure exactly where this is in the PowerPoint. Should have had a note. Okay. Yeah. Let's take a look at this. I should have had a note about which slide to review for this one. So in this exercise, we're talking about unique balanced scorecards, and one version that may work for some companies is the idea of cascading scorecards. And so you don't have just one scorecard that's for the company as a whole, but each individual unit within the company, which might mean a department, it might mean a location, or it might mean a particular office or manufacturing cell, has its own unique scorecard. And those scorecard, you set objectives for each one of those departments, and from there they build up to the overarching scorecard for the company. And so the use of cascading scorecard can be very helpful because it allows individual employees, departments, segments of the workforce to feel more connected to the goals, because you can see how the goals of the overarching company apply specifically to your area, to your job. Okay, so let's go back to that exercise now that I've really told you the answer. Paulson & Company is a large retail business that has a firm-wide balanced scorecard. Recently, management has discussed the need for the balanced scorecard to be more relevant to each individual department of the company. Specifically, management wants to come up with unique scorecards for its public relations and inventory management departments. For both departments, management recognizes that properly and efficiently training employees is important. For these purposes, management gathers data on the median training hours per employee and new employee performance review ratings. And so those metrics are for the company as a whole. They're saying in both departments, or in all of our departments, we're concerned about training. And so we can do that at the company level. However, for the inventory management department, management is focused on reducing stockouts or running out of certain inventory items and keeping accurate inventory counts. For these purposes, the company tracks the number of back orders and discrepancies between the physical and record counts of inventory respectively. And so it makes sense for that department to have its own unique measure, its own unique scorecard that addresses those issues, stockouts and keeping accurate inventory counts. But those two performance measures don't apply to the public relations department. For the public relations department, management is focused on providing the public CSR image of the company and attracting, so CSR is corporate social responsibility. I think I said that at the beginning of class, but just to make sure you're aware. So corporate social responsibility image of the company and attracting new customers. Management measures these objectives using Forbes CSR rating of Colson and Company and the number of new customers respectively. So letter A asks us to identify a name that suits the scorecard of the public relation and inventory management departments. And I really already told you the answer to that is the cascading scorecard. So they're measuring employee training at the corporate level, but then individual departments may have its own separate, smaller version of the scorecard. Identify the common metrics for both the departments in the new unique scorecards. And so I just said this. Employee training hours and employee performance are important for both departments, but the unique metrics of the inventory management department included number of back orders, so that's the reducing stockouts, and discrepancies of physical and record counts. Identify the unique metrics for the public relations, and that was the CSR ratings and the number of new customers. I would assume that if you have questions, you're going to ask. Let's move on to measure maps. Rizzo Gold Incorporated produces and sells hockey equipment, often custom made for online orders. The company has the following performance metrics on its balanced scorecard: days from ordered to delivered, number of shipping errors, customer retention rate, and market share. A measure map illustrates that the days from ordered to delivered and the number of shipping errors are both expected to directly affect the customer retention rate, which affects market share. So we talked about the connections between the metrics that we're using in one perspective and how they impact or influence or lead to the metrics that we use for another perspective. Additional internal analysis finds that every shipping error over 3 shipping errors per month reduces the customer retention rate by 1.5%. On average, each day above 3 days from ordered to delivered yields a reduction in the customer retention rate of 1%. Each day before 3 days from order to delivery yields an increase in the customer retention rate of 1% on average. Rizzo Gold Incorporated's current customer retention rate is 60%. The company estimates that for every 1% increase or decrease in the customer retention rate, market share changes at 0.5 in the same direction. And Rizzo Gold Inc.'s current market share is 21.4%. Ignoring any other factors, if the company has shipped 6 shipping errors this month and an average of 3.5 days from ordered to delivered, determine the new customer retention rate. So we have to do a bit of a calculation here, given the information that was just shared. So customer retention rate is currently 60%. If we have 6 shipping errors, the first bullet point tells us every shipping error over 3 reduces the customer retention rate by 1.5%. So if it's 6 shipping errors and every error over 3, I should probably write it out like this. So every error over 3, so that's 3 additional errors over 3, reduces our rate by 1.5%. So we started our current of 60. The 3 extra errors is going to reduce our customer retention rate by 4.5% total. Okay. And then we have an average of 3.5 days from ordered to delivered. And the second bullet point says, on average, each day above 3 days from ordered to delivered yields a reduction in the customer retention rate of 1%. So 3.5 days minus the 3 days times 1% is the reduction in our new customer retention rate based on the extra half day over 3. Okay. So let's do that math. 60% minus 3 extra days at 1.5% is going to subtract another 4.5% from that. And then the extra half day will cause our rate to go down by an extra 0.5%. And that tells me, based on these data, based on the information we have here, that our customer retention rate with those results will cause our customer retention rate to fall from 60 to 55%. Make sense so far? Okay. Now determine the new market share that Rizzo Gold Inc. expects to have. So again, we're going to start with the current market share of 21.4%. And bullet point number 5 says the company estimates that for every 1% increase or decrease in the customer retention rate, market share changes 0.5 in the same direction. Okay, so since our customer retention rate went down from 60 to 55%, and we expect that each 1% is going to decrease our market share by 0.5. So 5% reduction times a 0.5 means that our market share is expected to go down by 2.5. And so our new market share, whoops. Our new market share we would expect to be 18.9%. Not good. None of those things is good. We're having more errors than we expect to keep our customers happy. It's taking longer, and our customer retention rate is dropping, and therefore our market share is dropping. So this exercise is just showing you how we might need to take into account the data that we gather to support our metrics, or to compare to our objectives. Now, this exercise did not tell us what their goal is, but I'm pretty confident their goal wasn't to have their market share go down or their customer retention rate go down, but they would need to have a concrete number in mind. If they have a goal of increasing their customer retention rate, they should have a number. We want it to be, right now it's 60, we want it to be 61% by January or something like that. Okay, we'll go back to the PowerPoint for a minute. Our next exercise is related to cognitive biases. So cognition refers to thinking, thinking processes. So cognitive biases are the idea that there's something that does not allow us to see reality, that we're not thinking objectively and critically, but there's something that maybe we have a false or erroneous belief already in place that prevents us from doing that, that rational or informed decision making. So some of the cognitive biases that may affect the use of balanced scorecards, you can see that we're going to talk about each one of these three: motivated reasoning, surrogation, and common measures bias. So motivated reasoning is you see what you expect to see. You go in with a preconceived notion about what you're going to find, and you find it. How can that happen? Well, we ignore things that, the bullet point says ignore bad news, but I'm going to say we ignore things that don't fit into the pattern that we're expecting to see. We rely too heavily on good news. By good news, we mean the data or the results that support what we already thought was going to be true. Stop gathering information when results look good. Or if we aren't finding the information we need, we keep looking. So it's confirmation bias. And interpret ambiguous news as good news. So ambiguous means it's not clear whether it's one direction or the other. And so when we are using motivated reasoning, we're looking for information that, or results that support our preconceived notions. And so we are likely to spin news that is data that are not clear to be supportive of what we're already expecting to see. Surrogation is the second cognitive bias that we said we would talk about. The tendency to behave like the performance metrics are the strategic objectives. So the strategic objective is the overarching goal that we've identified for each one of the performance perspectives. The metric is what we decided we were going to use to measure our results for that strategic objective. If you've ever heard the phrase teaching to the test, it's kind of like that. That the goal is of teaching to the test is to help students get a better score on that, whatever that testing instrument is. The real goal should be to make sure students are learning. But when we make it all about the test, we make it, we are doing surrogation. We are causing surrogation. So we're ignoring, no, the real goal is to make sure students are learning. We think the goal is to get good grades on the test. We can do that in a company as well. Increasing customer satisfaction ratings by not allowing them to say that they're dissatisfied, for example, may not be the ultimate goal. The place where I have my car serviced, person who used to work there, every time I would get my car serviced, she would tell me, now you might get a survey and I need all top marks. If you have any concerns, if you have any problems, I want you to tell me about it. But she didn't want me to put that on the survey. And she wasn't that clear about it, except she said exactly what I just said. I need all top marks on the survey. If you have a problem, talk to me. In other words, don't put it on the survey. That was surrogation, because the goal was to improve customer satisfaction, not to improve the survey results, but to actually make sure customers are satisfied. Does that make sense? Can you see the difference between those two? And then finally, the common measures bias. So we just talked about the idea of using cascading scorecards, that a measure that makes sense in the inventory department might not make sense in the public relations department. When we try to make things too broad, we may miss the bigger picture. We may miss what makes individual units of the company different. So if we told the inventory management department that they couldn't use their individual cascading scorecard, because no, that doesn't apply to public relations, it doesn't apply to other departments, we might prevent them from either recognizing how well they're doing or determining areas of improvement, areas that need to be improved. And so it is important that whenever possible, you know, it's nice to have common measures that work across departments, like employee training, employee satisfaction. But what's important for one department may be unique to that department, and we need to allow that in order to actually maximize the usefulness of these performance metrics. So let's go back to our next exercise. Two departments within Cougar Gear Incorporated are production and sales. Each department has a unique scorecard as follows. And you can see that the blue represents common metrics, median training, and average employee tenure. But the polka dot represents unique metrics. So in the production department, they want to track production time per unit. And in the sales department, where they're focused on the customer perspective, they want to track online customer satisfaction ratings. Wouldn't make sense for the production department to be looking at that. The production department scorecard focuses on the learning and growth and internal processes perspectives. The sales department scorecard focuses on the learning and growth and customer perspectives. Both scorecards have the learning and growth performance metrics of median training hours per employee and average employee tenure. That means how long they've worked for the company. The production scorecard has the unique metrics of production time per unit and number of production shutdowns. The sales scorecard has the unique metrics of percentage of customers who shop again and online customer satisfaction rating. The performance targets for each metric are shown in the tan boxes just under the performance metrics. Okay, so these are those. Oh, sorry. So these are, sorry, I said that wrong. These are what they mean by the tan boxes. The performance targets for each metric are these boxes that are cross-hatched. And the actual achieved metrics are shown in the red boxes here, the bottom line of the scorecard. When evaluating both departments, Cougar Gear's management looks at the median training hours per employee and average employee tenure metrics, and subsequently decides to give the sales department a large bonus while giving the production department a minimal bonus. Identify the cognitive bias in the given situation. And so based on what we just discussed, the problem here is that they wanted to use a common measure to evaluate both department employees. And so the common measures were the blue, and you can see that the sales department was under their hours for median training and under their average employee tenure, while the production department was over in both. And so that's what yielded the large wait, that doesn't make sense. Okay, so let me back up for 2 seconds. So the sales department was under and the production department was over their own individual goals. The problem of the common measures is they didn't look at the individual department goals. They wanted to use the same standard across both departments, sales and production. And so they said, well, the sales department had lots of training. It exceeded the training for the production department, but they disregarded the fact that the sales department had higher goals, higher metrics that they were expected to meet. Identify the department that performs well. And so it can be either one or both. So which one performed well? The production department exceeded their expectations in all 4 categories. And the sales department exceeded their goals in the customer perspective, but they did not exceed their goals in the sales, excuse me, in the learning and growth perspective. So the production department met its goals in each of the 4 circumstances. My answer to this would be the production department. The sales department's doing okay. They met their goals in the customer perspective, but they did not achieve their expectation for learning and growth. Now I'm looking at this, and I think I disagree with we'll see what happens here. I think there's either mistake here. I think there's a mistake here. We'll see if it's been fixed. Letter C, identify the advantage of having a unique scorecard. And so we've already pointed out that the advantage of having a unique scorecard is it allows different divisions to evaluate what they need to measure the performance of their departments. The disadvantage of having a unique scorecard is that it's then hard to compare across divisions when we don't use the common measure. So the performance of the different divisions cannot be compared with the other divisions because we're using different metrics. And why I can't. It's got to be something about being down near the bottom of the screen. And so I don't agree with their answer to letter B unless they're using that common measures bias, because the sales department did not meet its goals for learning and growth. They only met their goals for customer, while the production department met their goals for all of those measures. Yes, the actual metrics are the red. Yeah, I'm not misreading that. So I would say that this is an error. So in order to get full credit for that, I would suggest that for letter B, you put the answer of B, the sales department, but I do not agree that that is the correct answer. Other than that question where I, again, disagree with their answer, do you have any questions about that exercise? Let's move on then to our final exercise. Okay. That's where I want to be. And our final exercise is about CSR, or corporate social responsibility. So I'm going to say this is the most controversial of the topics that we have covered this semester, period. The idea of corporate social responsibility, that corporations have a responsibility to the wider world beyond the success of their company, is a little bit controversial because ultimately, as I said, the goal of the company is to be profitable, to be sustainable as a company in the long run. Where I think everyone agrees is that some corporate social responsibility efforts such as sustainability, environmental awareness. The idea of the balanced scorecard and taking into account all those perspectives, I think everyone agrees that yes, there are ways that a company can be successful, be sustainable in the long run that go beyond just dollars and cents. But when we talk about things like reducing global poverty, is that really a goal of the corporation? That's where we may have some disagreement. That as an investor, and there's a controversy going on right now that there's a new law regulation that allows pension plan managers to invest pension funds into investments that have been screened for various social justice kind of questions. And it's really very controversial because some of those screens that managers are being allowed to consider will actually lead to lower returns on those investments. And so while most people agree that it's appropriate to have the option of socially screened funds, when we talk about a pension manager being allowed to invest funds for the retirees of a company without the knowledge or awareness or approval, and by that decision end up having lower returns, there's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of concern about whether that really is appropriate. Again, most people agree that having the option is appropriate, but being required or being forced into a lower return option because that's the only option, or because the pension plan manager is making the decision, not the beneficiaries of the plan, it's a little bit touchy. It's a little bit concerning, and this was just in the news in the past week that the regulations have changed related to that. So again, I'm not suggesting that businesses should not take those types of concerns into account. But the question is whether they should be required to, and whether it is appropriate for investors. If you invest, I'm just throwing an example out there with no data to support it. If you decide to invest in Nike, is it appropriate then for Nike to take your invested dollars and spend them on something that has nothing to do with the production and distribution and sale of athletic apparel? If you're not even aware of it as an investor, how do you know that that's something that you might want to encourage or avoid? But many of the corporate social responsibility initiatives, and you can see some examples on this slide, many of these are also in line with the improved efficiency and effectiveness of the running of a company. Again, that's where I think there's no controversy to recognize that there are some socially responsible approaches that companies can take that also improve the value of that company. I don't know if any of you might have taken the Inquire course called Triple Bottom Line. Did anyone take that as your Inquire course with Sarah Bray? Okay. So Sarah Bray is the director of the business program at JCC now. And she does offer has in the past offered an Inquire course called Triple Bottom Line that really is focused on this concept of looking not only at financial performance, but also at social and environmental performance as well. And it's a new-ish approach to evaluating the results of a company. Again, looking beyond even that balanced scorecard approach, because that's still the balanced scorecard approach is all about the company and not so much its impact on the broader global issues. Okay. And so the focus of, or one possibility, is to integrate corporate social responsibility initiatives right into the balanced scorecard. And that would be then called a sustainability balanced scorecard that takes into account beyond just the 4 perspectives that we've been talking about. And let's look at our last exercise and finish up the chapter. Sunny Nights Incorporated is completely powered by the city power grid, but management is considering switching fuel sources in an effort to improve the public's perception of the company's CSR. Within the next 5 years, management wants the company to be completely solar powered and to market this change through company advertising. Upon consulting with Sunny Nights, you've determined that an appropriate course of action is to include this CSR activity as a strategic objective on the company's current balanced scorecard. Identify the performance perspectives for the CSR strategic objective. And so the goal is to be completely solar powered and to market the change through company advertising. So that might be the customer performance perspective. Identify the performance metric for the objective. So how will we know if we have met our objective of being completely solar powered? And we can do that by measuring the percentage of solar energy use and the dependency level on the city power grid. And how will we know if we've marketed this change through company advertising? And that might be through a CSR perception survey. So have we done a good job marketing? Are our customers, is the public aware that we are doing this? And identify the yearly performance target of the company for the performance metric. So they want to do this within the next 5 years. So it's probably, if we want to do it in 5 years, that we need a 20% increase each year so that we get to that 100% in 5 years. Right now we are completely on the city grid. And so we would need a 20% increase from the base year. So we need to be careful when we say that. If we go from, we're talking about of the 100%, we need a 20% increase out of 100 each year, not just a 20% increase over what we were doing the previous year. And that's it. And we have finished chapter 28. Any questions before I stop recording? Thank you all for being here. I hope to see you at the review on Tuesday during our regular class time on Zoom. Use the Zoom link for class that's right in the course. And if I don't see you, good luck on the exam. Happy holidays. And let me know if you do have questions as you're finishing up the final requirements.